Welcome back to the Truth Factory. The UK police are going straight 1984 speech policing. This is the Bedfordshire Police Department's new program to stop right-wing extremism. It starts at the gym. Holy shit, I can't even go to the gym now without becoming a Nazi? Let's watch. Text. Dramatic music. Fight Club. Okay, there is an aerobic ball in the back, so maybe they're at the gym, but what kind of gym has booze and chips and popcorn? Like, sign me up. Okay, those look like three people who are not Caucasian, possibly Middle Eastern, beating up a blonde guy? Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Bedfordshire police don't know what real alt-right extremism is. Wow, so that was a huge pile of horse shit. Let's look at the comments. This professor says, are we to understand that the Bedford police are now a political unit? What is right-wing? Left-wing? What is extreme? What business is it of yours? Good point, Professor. Stan says, are you taking the piss? Where's your video about Islamic extremists, which is a far bigger problem? Your attitude is creating extremism. Lucan here says that he was attacked by Muslims twice and has video evidence, and the police did nothing about it. And now people are using the cross the line hashtag, ironically, to talk about Muslim extremists. So it's kind of backfiring. I mean, there are a lot of other things that are dramatically more dangerous in your life, like cars, heart attacks, strokes, cancer, but the media wants to talk about the prevalence and danger of right-wing terrorism, so sure, let's talk about it. Trigger warning, I'm about to discuss the real statistics that you might find to hashtag cross the line. Although race is the biggest contributing factor in the majority of hate crimes, the Bedfordshire police seem to think that the biggest issue right now is right-wing extremism, while most of their critics think that the bigger issue is Islamic extremism. This made me wonder what the statistics are and who is more dangerous, the extreme right or Islamic extremists. Finding any UK statistics on this topic was impossible as it's obviously been suppressed, so I went to Google and I found a multitude of left-wing opinion pieces that just talked about how anti-Muslim hate crimes are on the rise, and that white people are actually Satan, and that everything in the world is Trump's fault, and they all seem to reference this one study that claims that you're 7 times more likely to be killed by right-wing extremists than Islamic terrorists. This kind of surprised me, so I looked into the study and there were a lot of red flags. First, the study was done by David Stearman, a lefty who also writes for CNN and works for Research Center New America. Here are the people funding them. Google, the Open Society Foundation, which we know is owned by George Soros, as well as George Soros' son's foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, Bloomberg, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, just a bunch of international banksters that hate the right. And when you have someone funding a research study that has political motivations, it loses its credibility. So knowing who's behind it, I knew I had to dig deeper to find the real truth. So using scientific method, my hypothesis is that this study is a bunch of bullshit. So here's my question. Which ideology is more violent, Islam or the right wing? Now, because we're looking at ideologies, we can't just look at race like Caucasians versus Middle Easterns, because not all Caucasians are right-wing and not all right-wingers are white, and not all people from the Middle East are Muslims. Left-wing media likes to say that all Trump supporters are a part of the extreme right, which of course is not true, just as not all Muslims are terrorists. But this will give us an interesting comparison. What group has statistically caused more deaths in America? Trump supporters or Muslims? And for the small percent who fit here in my diagram, you're probably a very interesting person, and I would like to have coffee with you in our mega hats. Now, I'm not saying that the right wing doesn't have extremists and that they aren't dangerous. There are mentally ill people in every group, and anyone who thinks it's justifiable to kill someone based solely off their ideologies is mentally ill. Now let's look at the study. It says that right-wing extremists carried out 19 attacks, killing 48 Americans, while self-proclaimed jihadists carried out 7, killing 26. But what this study doesn't say is that this was calculated from September 12, 2001, and it ends right before the Orlando nightclub shooting, the 2 biggest terrorist attacks in the last 20 years. It seems a little bit biased, right? It's kind of like saying that you're a virgin, but only counting the couple of years where you were celibate. It doesn't work like that, because when we go and include those terrorist attacks, we had 2,996 and 9/11, plus the 49 from the Orlando shooting, and then the other 26, which gives us a total of 3,071 fatalities from Islamic extremism. Did my math just hashtag cross the line? Because this completely destroys the narrative that you're 7 times more likely to die from a right-wing extremist, when in fact, you're actually 64 times more likely to die from an Islamic terrorist than a right-wing extremist. The study also doesn't account for the disproportionate amount of right-wing voters to Muslims. Over 65 million people voted for Trump, which is roughly 26% of the US population, where there are only 3.3 million Muslims, which make up about 1% of the population. So this study is not calibrated to consider the disproportionate number of attacks by Muslim extremists in relation to their lack of prevalence as a minority group. With roughly 3,071 fatalities in terrorism from Islamic extremists, you have a significant overrepresentation from such a tiny minority. And as expected, it's completely overlooked and that data is suppressed. And for some reason, I don't think George Soros is going to pay me for correcting his statistical errors in the New America Research Center, because I just hashtag crossed the line. So the conclusion here is that in the US at least, Islam as an ideology is much more violent than being a Trump supporter or part of the right. I think the main thing to take from this is to do your own research and look at where that information is coming from, because there's so much disinformation being put out there by the fake news from people with political motivations like CNN, Snopes, MSNBC, so just be cautious. I just want to thank everyone who's supporting me on Patreon. I'll link to that in the description. Thank you guys. Have a great night.